The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after dawn, and Preston Jameson lowered his coffee mug to watch it grow closer, wondering what fool would be traveling through Oklahoma territory in the height of summer with two screaming infants strapped to their chest. He stood on the porch of his ranch house, boots planted wide on sun-bleached wood, squinting against the glare. The ranch stretched out before him in all directions, 3,000 acres of grazing land that had been in his family since 1867, back when this part of the territory was still being carved out of wilderness. Now, in the summer of 1891, it was prime cattle country, and Preston had built his herd up to over 500 head. At 28 years old, he had everything a man could want except the one thing that would make it all mean something. The dust cloud resolved itself into a wagon, listing badly to one side, pulled by a single exhausted horse. Preston set down his coffee and stepped off the porch, his hand instinctively checking the gun at his hip. You didn't survive long in Oklahoma territory without being cautious, even if things had settled down considerably in recent years. The wagon lurched to a stop about 50 yards from his house, and that was when he heard it clearly. Two babies, wailing in perfect discord, their cries cutting through the morning air like twin sirens. Preston walked forward slowly, his eyes adjusting to make out the figure hunched over the reins. It was a woman, and she was in bad shape. Her dress was torn and stained with what looked like days of hard travel. Her dark blonde hair hung in matted tangles around her face, and when she lifted her head to look at him, Preston saw eyes that were ringed with exhaustion and something deeper. Desperation, maybe even despair. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Water. The babies need water." Preston was moving before she finished speaking. He reached up and steadied her as she swayed, then looked down to see two tiny faces, red and scrunched with crying, strapped to her chest in a makeshift sling fashioned from what might have once been a shawl. They could not have been more than a few months old, and they were suffering in the heat. "Get down," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Come inside out of this sun." She practically fell into his arms, and he caught her weight easily, his muscles hardened from years of ranch work. The babies squalled louder as they were jostled, and Preston felt something twist in his chest at the sound. He had always loved children, had always imagined his ranch filled with their laughter. But that dream had died 2 years ago when his fiancée had chosen a banker in Guthrie over a life on an isolated ranch. He half carried the woman up the porch steps and into the cool dimness of his house. The main room was sparse but clean, furnished with handmade furniture and a few touches that spoke of a man trying to make a home alone. He guided her to the sofa and then hurried to pump water into a pitcher. "Here," he said, bringing a cup to her lips. "Slow, not too fast." She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, and then pulled back. "The babies, please. They have not eaten since yesterday morning. I ran out of milk and I have nothing to give them." Preston's mind raced. He kept goats for milk and cheese, a small herd that his ranch hand's wife tended. "I've goat milk, fresh this morning." "Will that work?" Relief flooded her face, transforming it for just a moment, and Preston caught a glimpse of what she must have looked like before whatever hell she had been through. She was beautiful, with high cheekbones and full lips, probably in her early 20s. "Yes," she whispered. "Please, anything." He brought the milk and helped her ease one of the babies from the sling. The infant was a girl, he saw, with wisps of dark hair and eyes that were squeezed shut in misery. Her sister followed a moment later, identical in every way except for a small birthmark on her left cheek. The woman tried to feed them, but her hands shook so badly that Preston had to take over. He had helped birth calves and foals, had bottle-fed orphaned animals more times than he could count, but holding these tiny human lives in his large, work-roughened hands felt entirely different. Sacred, somehow. The babies latched onto the milk-soaked cloth he had fashioned into a makeshift bottle, and their cries subsided into gulping, snuffling sounds. The woman sagged back against the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. What is your name?" Preston asked softly, keeping his attention on the baby in his arms, giving her some privacy for her tears. "Lily," she said after a moment. "Lily Lancaster. These are my daughters, Grace and Hope. Pretty names." He glanced at her, then back at the baby. "Where are you coming from, Miss Lancaster? And where were you headed?" Her face shuddered closed, and he saw fear flash across her features. "I cannot say. I just need to rest for a day, maybe two, and then I will be on my way. I can work to pay for the food and water. I can clean, cook, mend clothes. Anything." Preston studied her for a long moment. He had not built a successful ranch by being a fool, and this woman was clearly running from something. But he had also not been raised to turn away someone in need, especially not a woman with two helpless infants. "You are not in any condition to travel," he said finally. "You or those babies. Stay here, rest. We will talk about the rest later." "I cannot impose. This ranch needs the sound of children," Preston said, and the words came from somewhere deep inside him, a place he had not examined in a long time. "It has been too quiet for too long. Stay." Lily stared at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "Just a few days, until we are strong enough." "A few days," Preston agreed, knowing even as he said it that something had just shifted in his carefully ordered life. Over the next hours, Preston learned the basic rhythm of caring for twin infants. It was exhausting and relentless, and surprisingly fulfilling. He set Lily up in the guest bedroom, a room that had been his mother's before she passed 5 years ago, and helped her settle the babies in a drawer lined with soft blankets, the best makeshift cradle he could devise on short notice. When Lily finally fell into an exhausted sleep, the babies down for a rare, simultaneous nap, Preston walked back out onto his porch and stared at the horizon where she had appeared. His ranch hand, Miguel Cortez, rode up a few minutes later, his weathered face curious. "Saw a wagon," Miguel said in his accented English. He had come up from Texas 10 years ago and was the best hand Preston had ever employed. "Who is visiting?" "A woman with twin babies," Preston said. "She is in bad shape, Miguel, running from something." Miguel's expression grew serious. "You think there will be trouble? I do not know, but I am not turning her out." Preston met his friend's eyes squarely. "I wanted you to know in case anyone comes asking questions." Miguel nodded slowly. "My Rosa will want to help with the babies. She has been missing our grandchildren something fierce since our daughter moved to Tulsa. I would appreciate that." Preston clapped him on the shoulder. "Tell her to come by tomorrow morning." That night, Preston learned that silence was a foreign concept when there were infants in the house. Grace and Hope took turns waking every few hours, their cries pulling him from the sleep he had barely managed to fall into. Each time, he heard Lily stirring, heard her soft voice trying to soothe them, and finally, he gave up on rest altogether and went to help. He found her in the kitchen, swaying back and forth with both babies, one in each arm, singing a lullaby in a voice raw with exhaustion. "Let me take one," he said quietly. She turned, startled, and he saw tears on her face again. "I am so sorry. I know they are keeping you awake." "I will try to keep them quieter." "You cannot make a baby quiet when she is hungry or uncomfortable," Preston said reasonably, reaching for Hope. "And you cannot do this alone, not while you are recovering." "I have to." The words burst from her. I have been alone with them since they were born. Their father, she stopped abruptly, her face going pale. Preston did not push. Instead, he took Hope and began walking the length of the kitchen, bouncing gently the way he had seen Miguel's wife do with their grandchildren. The baby's cries subsided to whimpers, and then stopped altogether as she nestled against his chest. "You are not alone anymore," he said into the darkness. "Not for these few days, anyway." When dawn broke, Lily was asleep on the sofa. Grace sprawled on her chest, and Preston was at the kitchen table with Hope sleeping in the crook of his arm while he tried to drink coffee one-handed and plan his day. Miguel's wife, Rosa, arrived with the sunrise, took one look at the situation, and immediately began organizing. Rosa was a stout woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the no-nonsense manner of someone who had raised 6 children of her own. Within an hour, she had proper bottles assembled, a better sleeping arrangement for the twins constructed from a wooden crate and soft cloth, and a schedule laid out for feeding and changing. "This woman," Rosa said to Preston in the quiet of his kitchen while Lily slept, "she has been through something terrible. I can see it in her eyes, I know." "Will you protect her?" Preston looked at Rosa steadily. "Yes." "Good," she nodded. "Then I will help. Those babies, they need stability. They need a home. And this woman, she needs to heal." Over the next few days, a routine emerged. Preston ran his ranch, checking on the cattle, mending fences, handling the 1,000 small tasks that kept a spread this size running smoothly. But his mind was always partly back at the house, wondering if Lily needed help, if the babies were crying, if that woman with the haunted eyes was finally getting the rest she so desperately needed. Lily, for her part, threw herself into work as soon as she had recovered enough strength to stand for more than a few minutes. She cooked elaborate meals from his simple pantry, cleaned every corner of the house until it shone, and mended clothes he had not even realized needed mending. She worked with a kind of frantic energy that worried Preston, as if she was trying to prove her worth, trying to ensure he would not throw her out. On the 4th evening, he found her on the porch after the babies had gone down, staring out at the sunset painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of gold and red. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "Peaceful." "It is home," Preston replied, settling into the chair beside her. "My grandfather claimed this land in 1867, right after the war. He built that barn with his own hands, and my father expanded the herd. I have been running it since I was 22, when my father decided he was tired of Oklahoma winters and moved to California. You run all of this alone." "Miguel helps, and Rosa with the house and the garden, but yes, mostly alone." He was quiet for a moment. "I almost had a partner once, was engaged to a woman from Enid, but she decided ranch life was not for her." "Then she was a fool," Lily said fiercely, and when Preston looked at her in surprise, she blushed. "I just mean, any woman would be lucky to have a man like you, someone steady and kind and strong. You do not know me well enough to say that. I know you took in a stranger and her children without question. I know you have been nothing but gentle and patient, even when Grace and Hope kept you awake all night. I know you look at them like they are precious." Her voice caught. "That is enough." Preston felt something shift between them, a current of understanding and connection that had been building since that first morning. He wanted to ask about her past, about the baby's father, about what she was running from. But he also understood that some stories needed time to be told. "Tell me about them," he said instead, nodding toward the house where the twins slept. "Grace and Hope, were they born here in the territory?" Lily's hands twisted in her lap. "Yes, in Arkansas City, Kansas, just across the border. I was living there with my husband." She said the word like it tasted bitter. "He was a good man when I married him, or at least I thought he was. But after we wed, he changed. started drinking, started getting angry. When I found out I was carrying twins, I thought maybe it would make things better, but it made them worse. Preston's jaw tightened, but he kept silent, letting her speak. When the babies were born, he wanted sons. He took one look at Grace and Hope and said they were useless to him. He needed boys to work his shop, he said, boys to carry on his name. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He told me to get rid of them, to take them to an orphanage in Wichita. When I refused, he said we all had to leave. He threw us out with nothing but the clothes on our backs and that old wagon his father had left him. Jesus, Preston breathed. I had nowhere to go. My parents are dead. I have no siblings, so I just started driving. I thought maybe I could find work somewhere, could find a place that would take us in. But no one wants a woman with twin babies and no husband. She laughed bitterly. The irony is that I have a husband. I am just not allowed to be with him because he does not want daughters. Preston was quiet for a long moment, processing this. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. His name, what is it? Why? Because a man who would throw out his wife and newborn daughters does not deserve to call himself a man, let alone a husband. And if he comes looking for you, I want to know who I am dealing with. Lily turned to look at him fully, her eyes wide. You would stand against him, for us? Yes. But you barely know me. I know enough. Preston held her gaze. His name, Lily, Thomas Lancaster, but he will not come. He made it very clear that he wanted nothing to do with us. He even said I could tell people I was a widow if I wanted, that he did not care. She wrapped her arms around herself. That was almost worse somehow, the fact that he did not care enough to even maintain appearances. Preston stood and walked to the porch railing, his hands gripping the wood hard enough that his knuckles went white. He thought about his own parents, how his mother and father had loved him and his younger sister with a fierce devotion. He thought about the dreams he had once had of filling this ranch with children, of teaching them to ride and rope and love the land the way he did. And he thought about how this woman, this stranger who had appeared on his horizon like an answer to a prayer he had not known he was praying, had been treated like garbage by the man who had vowed to cherish her. Stay, he said, turning back to her. Not just a few more days. Stay here. You and Grace and Hope, I meant what I said that first day. This ranch needs the sound of children. Lily stood slowly, her eyes searching his face. Preston, I cannot ask that of you. You are not asking, I am offering. He took a step toward her. I know it is fast. I know we hardly know each other. But I also know that you need a home and I need— He stopped, trying to find the right words. I have been alone here for a long time, Lily, building something with no one to share it with. When you arrived, when I heard those babies crying, it was like something in me woke up. Like I remembered what I was building this all for in the first place. What are you saying? I am saying stay. Let me provide for you and the girls. Let this be your home. He took a breath. I am not asking for anything in return except your company, your presence here, the chance to know you better and for you to know me. And if someday, if we find that there could be something more between us, well, we can cross that bridge when we come to it. Lily pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling over. Why would you do this for us? Because it is the right thing to do, and because for the first time in 2 years I feel like my life has purpose again. He smiled crookedly. Those twins have terrible timing and cry loud enough to wake the dead, but when I hold them, when they fall asleep against my chest, I feel something I have not felt in a long time. Hope seems fitting, given one of their names. She laughed through her tears, and then, before Preston quite knew what was happening, she had crossed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him. He held her carefully, conscious of her fragility, her vulnerability, and felt her shake with sobs against his chest. Thank you, she whispered into his shirt. Thank you for giving us a chance. The summer days rolled into each other, each one bringing new discoveries and small moments of connection. Preston found himself hurrying through his ranch work so he could get back to the house, could spend time with Lily and the babies. He taught Lily how to ride his gentlest mare, taking her out in the early mornings before the heat became oppressive, showing her the boundaries of his property and the best spots where wildflowers grew thick and fragrant. The twins grew plumper and more alert, their eyes tracking movement, their cries becoming more communicative. Preston learned to tell them apart not just by Hope's birthmark, but by their different personalities. Grace was the fussier of the two, quicker to cry but also quicker to smile. Hope was more contemplative, content to lie on a blanket and study the world around her with serious concentration. Rosa doted on them both, bringing over clothes her own grandchildren had outgrown and spending hours rocking them while Lily caught up on rest or helped Preston with ranch accounts. Miguel, gruff and practical, nevertheless could often be found carving wooden toys in the barn, his rough hands creating smooth horses and cattle for the girls to play with when they were older. Enid, the nearest town, was 15 miles away, close enough to reach for supplies but far enough that Preston did not have to worry about too many unexpected visitors. Still, as the weeks passed and Lily remained, he knew he would eventually need to take her into town, to introduce her properly and head off any gossip before it could start. "I will tell people you are my cousin," he said one evening as they sat on the porch, the twins asleep in their makeshift cradle nearby. "Widowed and come to help me run the household." Lily frowned. "I do not want you to lie for me. It is a small lie to prevent a lot of uncomfortable questions." "And to protect you." Preston looked at her seriously. "If people know you are still married, if word somehow gets back to Lancaster, there could be trouble." "He will not come. You cannot know that. Men like him, they do not like losing control. Even if he does not want you, he might not like the idea of you building a life without him." Preston leaned forward. "Let me protect you, Lily. Let me keep you safe." She was quiet for a long time and then she nodded. "All right, cousins, but Preston." "Yes, I hate lying. When this is over, when enough time has passed, I want to be honest about who I am and where I came from." "When the time is right," Preston agreed, "we will tell the truth." Their first trip to Enid came in early August, when the twins were nearly 4 months old and beginning to outgrow the clothes Rosa had provided. Preston hitched up his good wagon and made sure the ride was as smooth as possible, conscious of Lily's nervousness as they approached the town. Enid had been established as part of the Cherokee Outlet, opening in 1893, though it had existed as a small settlement before that. Now, in 1891, it was a bustling community of nearly 2,000 people, with a main street lined with shops and businesses, a train depot that connected it to the wider world, and a church that served as the social center of the community. Preston handled the introductions carefully. At the general store, he introduced Lily as his cousin from Kansas, recently widowed and helping him manage his household. At the feed store, he mentioned casually that she had twin daughters and was not looking for sympathy, just a chance to build a new life. By the time they stopped at the church to meet Reverend Thompson, the story was well established, and the Reverend's wife cooed appropriately over Grace and Hope without asking too many probing questions. On the ride home, Lily was quiet, staring out at the rolling prairie that stretched in all directions. "You did well," Preston said finally. "Everyone liked you." "I felt like a fraud." She glanced at him. "All those people being kind to me based on lies. Based on half-truths told to protect you and your daughters. There is a difference." Preston kept his voice gentle. "I know it does not feel good, Lily, but it is necessary." "I know," she sighed. It is just hard, building a life on a foundation that is not entirely honest. Then we will make sure the rest of it is as honest as possible, Preston said. Starting now, ask me anything you want to know, I will answer truthfully. Lily was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she said, "The woman you were engaged to, you still love her?" Preston had not expected that question, but he answered without hesitation. "No, I thought I did, but I realized after she left that I was more in love with the idea of having a partner, of not being alone, than I was with her specifically. She wanted a life in town, close to shops and people and society. I wanted someone who would love the ranch the way I do. We were never going to work." "Do you regret asking her?" "No. Because if she had said yes, if she had settled for a life she did not want, we both would have been miserable. And I would not have been here the morning you arrived." He glanced at her. "Some things happen for a reason, I think." "Do you really believe that?" "I am starting to." He smiled. "My turn. Why did you marry Lancaster?" Lily's face darkened. "Because I was young and stupid and he was handsome and charming, at least at first. He courted me properly, met my parents, said all the right things. By the time I saw who he really was, we were already married and my parents had died in a fire. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. So I stayed and told myself it would get better." She looked down at her hands. "It did not get better, it just got worse slowly enough that I kept making excuses for him. That is not your fault. I know that in my head, but in my heart," she shook her head, "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, all the times I should have left before it got so bad." "You did leave," Preston pointed out. "When it mattered most, when your daughters needed you to be strong, you left. You loaded them into a wagon and drove away from everything you knew, looking for something better. That takes courage, Lily. Do not discount that." She was crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks, and Preston wished he could stop the wagon and hold her. But they were still visible from the main road, and he did not want to do anything that might spark gossip. So instead, he reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers, and held on for the rest of the ride home. That night, after the babies were fed and sleeping, after Lily had retired to her room, Preston sat alone on the porch and admitted to himself what he had been trying to deny for weeks. He was falling in love with her. It was not just her beauty, though she was lovely, especially now that she had recovered from her ordeal and filled out with regular meals and rest. It was not just gratitude that she was there, bringing life and purpose to his empty house. It was her. The way she hummed while she cooked, the way she threw herself completely into caring for her daughters, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes and called him out when he was being stubborn. The way she looked at his ranch like it was something precious, worth protecting and nurturing. He wanted to tell her, wanted to pull her into his arms and kiss her until neither of them could think straight. But he also knew that she was still healing, still learning to trust again after what Lancaster had done to her. He could not rush her, could not press for more than she was ready to give. So he would wait. He would be patient and steady and present, and he would hope that, eventually, she would come to feel for him even a fraction of what he felt for her. Autumn came to Oklahoma Territory in a blaze of gold and copper. The cottonwoods along the creek turning brilliant yellow, the prairie grass fading to amber. The cattle fattened on the last of the summer grazing, and Preston began the work of culling his herd, selecting which animals to sell at market and which to keep through the winter. Grace and Hope were sitting up now, babbling to each other in a language only they understood, reaching for everything within their grasp. The house rang with their laughter and occasional squabbles over toys, and Preston could not imagine it any other way. Lily had bloomed over the summer, her body regaining its strength, her smiles coming more easily. She managed the household with quiet competence, working alongside Rosa to preserve vegetables from the garden, to can fruit and make cheese, to prepare for the long winter ahead. And more than that, she had become his partner in ways he had not anticipated, sitting with him in the evenings to discuss the ranch, offering suggestions that were often surprisingly insightful, learning the business side of cattle ranching as thoroughly as she had learned to cook and clean. They fell into an easy companionship, comfortable with each other in the way of people who had weathered storms together. But underneath that comfort, Preston felt the current of something deeper, a tension that pulled taut whenever their hands brushed, whenever he caught her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. It came to a head one evening in late September. Preston had been working since before dawn, helping Miguel round up strays from the far pasture. He came back to the house exhausted and dusty, looking forward to a hot meal and maybe some time on the porch before bed. Instead, he found Lily in the kitchen, the babies already asleep, preparing his favorite meal of beef stew and fresh bread. "You did not have to go to all this trouble," he said, washing his hands at the pump. "I wanted to." She glanced at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "Preston, can we talk? After dinner, of course." He tried to keep his voice casual, but his heart was suddenly pounding. "Is something wrong?" "No, I just need to tell you something." They ate in relative silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. When the dishes were cleared and they had settled on the porch in their usual spots, Lily turned to him with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I need to thank you," she began. "You have thanked me plenty, please. Let me finish." She took a breath. "When I came here, I was broken. I had been thrown away by a man I thought loved me, told that my daughters were worthless, left with nothing. I drove toward your ranch expecting to die in the heat, expecting that this was just how my story would end. And then you appeared. And you did not just give me water and send me on my way. You gave me a home. You gave my daughters a future. You gave me back my sense of worth." "Lily, I am not finished." Her voice was shaking now. "Over these past months I have watched you. I have seen how you work from dawn to dusk to keep this ranch running. I have seen how gentle you are with grace and hope, how you light up when they smile at you. I have seen how patient you have been with me, never pushing, never demanding more than I could give. And I have realized something." Preston's heart was hammering so hard he was sure she could hear it. "What have you realized?" "That I am in love with you." The words came out in a rush, and Lily looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I know I should not be. I know I am still married to Thomas, that this is complicated and messy and probably foolish, but I cannot help it. You have shown me what it means to be cherished, to be valued, to be treated like a partner instead of a possession. And I am so completely in love with you that it terrifies me." Preston stood slowly, crossed the space between them, and pulled her to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears, and looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I have been in love with you since the day you told me Grace and Hope's names," he said roughly. "Since I saw you crying with relief because your daughters were finally fed. Since I watched you throw yourself into rebuilding your life with a courage I can barely comprehend. I have been waiting for you, Lily. Waiting for you to heal enough to see me as more than just a rescuer. And now that you do, now that you feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, I am never letting you go. But Thomas can go to hell for all I care." Preston's voice was fierce. "You said he told you to tell people you were a widow. As far as I am concerned, you are. The man you married does not exist anymore, if he ever did. What exists is you and me and 2 little girls who need a father who will love them unconditionally. Let me be that man, Lily. Let me be your husband in truth, in every way that matters." "It is not legal," she whispered. "I am already married. Then we will fix it. We will hire a lawyer, get an annulment or a divorce or whatever it takes. I have money saved. We will make this right." He pressed his forehead against hers. "But Lily, I need you to know that in my heart you are already my wife. You have been for months. I just needed you to catch up." She laughed through her tears, and then she was kissing him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Preston wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back with all the pent-up longing of the past months, pouring everything he felt into that single perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lily smiled up at him with a joy he had never seen on her face before. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. "And I am going to spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms as the stars came out over the Oklahoma prairie, and the sound of twin babies sleeping peacefully drifted from the house. It was not perfect. There were still legal tangles to sort through, still conversations to be had and decisions to be made. But in that moment, with Lily in his arms and his future suddenly bright with possibility, Preston felt a contentment he had never known. This, he thought, was what he had been building toward all along. The next morning, Preston rode into Enid and sent a telegram to a lawyer in Guthrie he had done business with before. By afternoon, he had a response. The lawyer would take Lily's case, but he needed more information. He needed to know the exact circumstances of her marriage, needed documentation if she had it, needed to know if Thomas Lancaster would contest a divorce. When Preston returned to the ranch, he found Lily in the barn, watching Miguel teach the twins to pet the gentlest of the horses while Rosa supervised. Grace squealed with delight when the horse's soft nose touched her palm, and Hope studied the animal with her characteristic seriousness before reaching out a tentative hand. "They are naturals," Miguel said with a grin. "Before you know it, they will be riding." "Not for a few years yet," Lily said, but she was smiling. She glanced up as Preston approached, and he saw the question in her eyes. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Inside." They left the twins with Rosa and Miguel and walked back to the house. In the privacy of the kitchen, Preston laid out what the lawyer had said. "He needs details," Preston finished. "About your marriage, about Lancaster's actions. He thinks we have a good case for abandonment, maybe even annulment if Lancaster will not contest." Lily sat down heavily at the table. "I have our marriage certificate. I brought it with me because I thought I might need it to prove who I was to get work somewhere." She looked up at Preston. "But contacting Thomas, asking him about a divorce, that means he will know where I am." "Not necessarily. The lawyer can handle it through correspondence, can keep your location private. And even if Lancaster does find out where you are, he will have to go through me to get to you." Preston knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "I meant what I said last night, Lily. I am not letting anyone hurt you or those girls. Not ever again." She searched his face, then nodded slowly. "All right, I will give him whatever information he needs." Over the next few weeks, letters flew back and forth between the ranch and the lawyer in Guthrie. Lily wrote out a detailed account of her marriage, of Thomas's drinking and anger, of his rejection of their daughters and his order for her to leave. Preston supplemented it with his own sworn statement about the condition she had been in when she arrived, about the evidence of long-term mistreatment. Finally, in mid-October, the lawyer sent word that he had located Thomas Lancaster and served him with divorce papers, citing abandonment and cruelty. There was nothing to do now but wait for his response. The waiting was agony. Every day, Lily jumped at unexpected sounds, convinced that Thomas would appear on the horizon demanding his rights as a husband. Preston increased his vigilance, making sure someone was always at the ranch house, keeping his rifle close. Miguel, who had served in the army before settling in Oklahoma, took to riding the property line regularly, checking for any signs of intruders. But the days passed, and no one came. In early November, when the first cold snap hit and the leaves had mostly fallen from the trees, the lawyer's letter finally arrived. Preston read it once, then again, before letting out a whoop of joy that brought Lily running from the house. "What is it? What happened?" he signed them. Preston swept her up and spun her around, laughing. Lancaster signed the divorce papers. No contest, no argument. He just signed them and sent them back. "You are free, Lily. You are actually free." She stared at the letter in his hands, hardly daring to believe it. He did not even argue. Did not demand anything. The lawyer says he seemed relieved. Apparently, he has already remarried some woman from Missouri who was willing to overlook the fact that he had thrown out his first wife and children. Preston's voice hardened for a moment. "He is a bastard, Lily. But in this one thing, his cruelty is working in our favor. He does not want you back because he never valued you in the first place, and that means you are free to move forward." Lily took the letter with shaking hands and read it herself. When she looked up, there were tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "I am free," she whispered. "I am actually free." "You are." Preston pulled her close. "Which means I can do this properly now." He stepped back and, to Lily's shock, dropped to one knee right there in the yard. From his pocket, he pulled out a ring, a simple gold band set with a small diamond that had been his grandmother's. "Lily Lancaster, you came into my life when I least expected it and most needed it. You brought light and laughter and love into this ranch, into my heart. You have shown me what it means to be brave, to fight for what matters, to build something real and lasting. I love you with everything I am, and I love those two little girls in there like they were my own blood. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and their father, today and every day for the rest of our lives?" Lily dropped to her knees beside him, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing again, right there in the dirt of the ranch yard, while Rosa and Miguel cheered from the porch and the twins banged on the window, too young to understand but responding to the joy in the air. They were married 3 weeks later in the church in Enid, with half the town in attendance and the twins fussing through the ceremony, until Preston picked them both up and held them while he said his vows, one baby on each arm, making promises not just to their mother but to them as well. "I promise to protect you," he said to Grace and Hope, his voice thick with emotion. "To provide for you, to teach you and guide you and love you unconditionally. I promise to be the father you deserve, the father you should have had from the beginning. And I promise that no matter what life brings, you will always have a home here and you will always be treasured." The twins, as if understanding the weight of the moment, were perfectly quiet, their dark eyes fixed on his face. And when he turned back to Lily to seal their marriage with a kiss, Preston felt something click into place inside him, a sense of rightness and completion he had never known. This was his family now. These 3 people were his to love and cherish, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure they knew it. The winter of 1891 was harsh, with snow that piled deep and winds that howled across the prairie like living things. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and laughter and love. Preston taught Lily to keep the ranch books, to understand the rhythms of cattle ranching and the economics that kept the operation profitable. She proved to have a head for numbers and a sharp eye for waste, and together they streamlined operations in ways that Miguel said were long overdue. The twins grew and thrived, learning to crawl and then to pull themselves up on furniture, taking their first wobbly steps in early spring with both parents cheering them on. They learned to say Papa before Mama, much to Lily's mock outrage and Preston's unbearable pride. When spring finally broke and the prairie turned green again, Preston took his family on a ride to the far edge of his property, to a spot where a creek ran clear and cottonwoods provided shade. There, on a blanket spread on new grass with his daughters napping beside him and his wife in his arms, he felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "That I am the luckiest man alive." He kissed the top of her head. "That I could not have imagined this a year ago, could not have dreamed I would be this happy." "I feel the same way." She propped herself up to look at him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had driven past your ranch that morning? If I had gone to the next homestead or into Enid itself?" "I try not to," Preston admitted. "The thought of you out there alone, maybe not finding help in time, it makes me sick. I prefer to focus on the fact that you did come here, that somehow, against all odds, you found me. Or you found me." Lily smiled. "Either way, I am grateful. For you, for this place, for the life we are building." "It is going to be a good life," Preston promised. "I am going to make sure of it." And he did. Over the next years, Preston and Lily built something extraordinary on that ranch in Oklahoma Territory. They expanded the herd, bought adjoining land when it became available, and built a reputation for quality cattle that stretched from Enid to Guthrie and beyond. They became pillars of the community, known for their generosity to neighbors in need and their fierce devotion to their family. Grace and Hope grew into bright, curious little girls, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, trailing after their father as he worked the ranch, absorbing lessons about cattle and horses and the land itself. Preston treated them identically to how he would have treated sons, teaching them to rope and brand, to mend fences and raid the weather, to understand that they were just as capable as any boy. When the twins were 3 years old, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. Preston was overjoyed, but also terrified, haunted by Lily's stories of what her first pregnancy had been like with Thomas. He hovered over her constantly, to the point where Lily finally had to sit him down and explain that she was not fragile, that this pregnancy was different because she was healthy and happy and had support. "I know you are worried," she said, taking his hands. "But Preston, this baby is ours." Made in love, carried in joy, that is completely different from the twins. "I just want you safe," he said roughly. "You and the baby both. We will be." She pressed his hand to her belly. "I promise." In early summer of 1894, Lily gave birth to a son. They named him Patrick James Jameson, and Preston held him with tears streaming down his face, marveling at the tiny, perfect person he had helped create. Grace and Hope, at 3 years old, were fascinated by their new brother, wanting to help with every diaper change and feeding. "He is so small," Grace observed, peering into the cradle. "You were that small once," Lily told her, pulling her eldest daughter into her lap. "Smaller even because there were 2 of you sharing space." "Was Papa there when we were born?" Hope asked, climbing up on Preston's other side. Preston and Lily exchanged glances, a full conversation happening in that single look. They had agreed to be honest with the girls, to never lie about their origins, but they had not expected the question quite so soon. "No," Lily said gently. "Papa was not there when you were born. But he has been here for you ever since you were just a few months old, and he loves you just as much as if he had been there from the very beginning." "More," Preston said, his voice thick. "I love you more than anything in this world, both of you. And it does not matter who was there when you were born. What matters is who is here now, who will always be here. And that is me. Always." Grace seemed satisfied with that answer, but Hope studied him with her serious dark eyes. "You are our real papa," she said finally, as if settling a matter of great importance. "The papa of our hearts." Preston had to set down the baby and pull both girls into his arms because he was crying too hard to see straight. And Lily, watching her husband embrace the daughters he had chosen as surely as they had chosen him, felt a love so overwhelming it was almost frightening in its intensity. This was her family. This was her life. And it was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The years rolled on, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. There was the summer of the big drought, when Preston had to make the painful decision to sell off part of his herd rather than watch them starve. There was the winter when a flu swept through Enid, and Preston rode through blizzards to fetch the doctor for Lily and the children, refusing to leave their sides until the fever broke. There was the day Grace fell from a horse and broke her arm, and Preston, usually so calm in a crisis, had gone white as a sheet and nearly fainted. But there were triumphs too. The year the ranch turned its biggest profit yet, and Preston was able to build Lily the bigger kitchen she had been dreaming of. The Christmas when Patrick, at 2 years old, received his first pony and spent the entire day refusing to dismount. The summer afternoon when Hope announced she wanted to be a veterinarian like the new doctor in Enid, and Preston had to explain that it would be hard for a woman, but that he would support her no matter what she chose. When the twins turned 10, in the summer of 1901, Preston gathered the family for a special dinner. Rosa had helped Lily prepare a feast, and even Miguel and his wife were invited to join them. When everyone was seated, Preston stood at the head of the table and raised his glass. 10 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the table, a woman and 2 babies appeared on the horizon of this ranch. They were running from pain and toward hope, though they did not know if they would find it. And I was alone here, building something with no one to share it with, wondering if I would spend the rest of my life isolated and lonely. He looked at Lily, his eyes full of everything they had been through together. We found each other at exactly the right moment, and together we built this. A family, a home, a life worth living. Grace, Hope, Patrick, you are my greatest achievements, not this ranch, not the cattle, not any amount of money or success. You are what I am most proud of. Grace, always the more emotional of the twins, was already crying. Hope had her jaw set, determined not to show weakness, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Patrick, at 7 years old, just looked confused about why everyone was being so serious. I wanted you all to know, Preston continued, that I could not have imagined a better life than this. And I am grateful every single day for the choice Lily made to trust me to stay here to build this with me. You are my world, all of you. He sat down and Lily reached for his hand under the table, squeezing tight. Across from them, Grace and Hope exchanged looks, and then Hope stood. We wrote something, she announced. For Papa. Grace stood beside her, and together, the twins recited a poem they had written about the father who had chosen them, who had loved them when they had been abandoned, who had shown them what family really meant. It was simple and heartfelt, and by the time they finished, there was not a dry eye at the table. Preston pulled them both into his arms, kissing the tops of their heads. I love you, he said simply. Both of you so much. That night, after the children were asleep and Rosa and Miguel had gone home, Preston and Lily sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. But this time, instead of looking out at an uncertain future, they looked back at everything they had built together. You have any regrets? Preston asked quietly. Lily considered the question seriously. About Thomas, about that part of my life, she shook her head. No, because as terrible as it was, it led me here, to you, to this life. And I would not change any of it if it meant not having what we have now. Not even the hard parts. The times when money was tight or the children were sick or we fought about how to run the ranch, especially not those parts. Lily smiled. Those are what make this real, Preston. Perfect is boring. Perfect does not mean anything. But what we have, with all its complications and challenges and hard-won victories, that is real. That is worth something. Preston pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the Oklahoma night. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. An owl called from the cottonwoods. And inside the house, 3 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted and safe. "This ranch needs the sound of children," Preston said softly, echoing the words he had spoken that first day. "I meant it then, but I did not know how true it was. This place was just land and cattle before. Now it is home because of you and them." "Because of us," Lily corrected. "All of us together." "All of us together," Preston agreed. 2 years later, Lily gave birth to their second son, Daniel. 3 years after that, a daughter arrived, named Rose after Preston's mother. The house that had once seemed too big and too quiet was now constantly full of noise and life, with children running through the rooms, fighting and playing and growing. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's determination and her father's steady temperament. She married at 21, a rancher's son from the next county over, and Preston walked her down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. Hope fulfilled her childhood dream, going to veterinary school in Kansas City, and becoming one of the first female veterinarians in Oklahoma, though she never married, preferring to focus on her practice and her family's ranch. Patrick took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew, working beside his father with a pride and joy that made Preston's heart swell every time he saw it. By the time Preston turned 50, in the spring of 1913, he was the patriarch of a sprawling family. Grace had given them 2 grandchildren. Hope had her practice in Enid and rode out to the ranch every Sunday for dinner. Patrick, at 19, was engaged to a sweet girl from town. And Daniel and Rose, at 11 and 8 respectively, were still running wild on the ranch, learning the land the way all Preston's children had. Lily, at 43, was as beautiful to him as she had been that first morning when she appeared on his horizon. Her hair had threads of silver now, and there were lines around her eyes from years of laughter and sun. But when she smiled at him across the dinner table surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Preston felt exactly the same way he had felt when he first kissed her on the porch all those years ago. Completely and utterly in love. One evening, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Preston found a letter on his desk. It was in Grace's handwriting, and when he opened it, he found a long, heartfelt note thanking him for being her father. "I know I am not yours by blood," she had written. "But you have been my father in every way that matters. You taught me to ride and to rope, to read the sky for weather, and to understand the value of hard work. But more than that, you taught me what love looks like. You showed me, every single day, that a man can be strong and gentle, that he can work hard and still make time for his children, that he can love a woman with his whole heart and treat her as an equal partner. When I chose my husband, I looked for someone like you. And I found him because you showed me what to look for. Thank you, Papa, for everything. I love you." Preston read the letter 3 times, each time with tears streaming down his face. When Lily found him, he wordlessly handed it to her, and she read it with her own eyes growing wet. "She is right, you know," Lily said softly. "You showed all of them what love looks like, what family means." "I just loved you," Preston said simply. "All of you. It was not hard. It was the easiest thing I ever did. It was not easy. Raising 5 children, running a ranch, dealing with droughts and hard times and sick animals and everything else that was not easy. Lily sat in his lap, something she still did even after all these years. But you made it look easy because you loved us, and we all knew it every single day. That made all the difference. Preston held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "I meant what I said that first day," he murmured. "This ranch needed the sound of children, but what I did not know then was that I needed them too. I needed you. You saved me just as much as I saved you. We saved each other," Lily said, "and we built something beautiful together." The years continued their steady march. Grace had more children, making Preston and Lily grandparents 6 times over. Hope's veterinary practice thrived, and she became known throughout Oklahoma for her skill with horses. Patrick married and brought his wife to live on the ranch, building a house on the eastern section of the property and taking over more of the day-to-day operations. Daniel followed his older brother into ranching, content to work the land and build a life close to home. And Rose, surprising everyone, became a teacher in Enid, dedicating herself to educating the next generation. In the spring of 1920, Preston and Lily celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together nearly 100 people. The ranch house and yard were packed with family and friends, with neighbors and business associates, with people whose lives had been touched by their generosity and kindness over the years. Standing on the porch, looking out at the crowd, Preston felt the weight of his 60 years and the satisfaction of a life well lived. Beside him, Lily slipped her hand into his and he squeezed gently. "You remember that first morning?" she asked. "When I drove up to your house more dead than alive." "Every detail," Preston confirmed. "I saw the dust cloud and thought it was the strangest thing, someone traveling in that heat. And then I saw you and those babies and I just knew. Somehow, I knew that everything was about to change." "The sound of children," Lily quoted. "That is what you said. This ranch needs the sound of children." "It did. It does." Preston pulled her close. "And now it has it. Children and grandchildren and so much life and love that sometimes I can hardly believe it is real. It is real." Lily stood on her toes to kiss him, a quick press of lips that still made his heart race after all these years. "And it is ours. Everything we built, everything we created, it is ours together." Patrick appeared on the porch, his own children trailing behind him. "Papa, Mama, everyone is asking for you to say something." Preston looked at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. Together they walked to the center of the yard and the crowd quieted. "I am not much for speeches," Preston began, his voice carrying across the gathering. "But I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for being here, for being part of our lives, for helping us build this community we are all part of." He paused, looking at Lily. 28 years ago, I was alone on this ranch. I had land and cattle and money, but I did not have what mattered. And then one morning, a wagon appeared on the horizon. In it was a woman and 2 babies running from pain and toward hope. I took them in, and in doing so, I found everything I had been missing: purpose, joy, love, family. There were murmurs of appreciation from the crowd, and Preston saw Grace and Hope standing together, both of them crying openly now. "Life is not always easy," Preston continued. "There have been hard times and losses and days when we wondered if we would make it through. But we did make it through together because that is what family does. That is what community does. We support each other. We lift each other up. We choose to see the best in each other and to build something lasting." He raised his glass. "So here is to the next 28 years and to all of you who have made this life possible. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Preston pulled Lily into his arms, kissing her thoroughly while their children groaned in mock embarrassment, and their grandchildren giggled. As the sun set over the Oklahoma prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Preston looked around at everything he had built. The ranch that had been in his family for 3 generations. The house that now rang with laughter and life. The children and grandchildren who carried forward his legacy, not just of land and cattle, but of love and commitment, and the belief that family was not always about blood, but about choice and devotion. He thought about that morning 28 years ago, when he had seen a dust cloud on the horizon and made the choice to help instead of turning away. And he marveled at how one single decision, one moment of compassion, had changed the entire trajectory of his life. Lily leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her waist, holding her close. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied. "Always." As the party continued around them, as their family laughed and talked and celebrated, Preston and Lily stood together and watched the sun set on another perfect day. They had come so far from that desperate morning in the summer of 1891. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had raised 5 children and were now watching grandchildren grow. They had built a ranch into something legendary, known throughout Oklahoma for its quality cattle and ethical practices. But more than any of that, they had built a love that had endured through everything life had thrown at them. A love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something vast and unshakable. The ranch did indeed need the sound of children, Preston thought. But what he had not known that morning was that he needed Lily just as much. Needed her strength and her courage, her laughter and her love. Needed her partnership in building not just a ranch but a life worth living. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as the sounds of his family filled the air around him, Preston Jameson knew beyond any doubt that he was the luckiest man who had ever lived. Because he had found his home, his purpose, his reason for everything. He had found her. And together, they had built something that would last for generations. Not just a ranch, not just a business, but a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. A testament to the power of choosing compassion over indifference, of opening your heart even when it was risky, of believing that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. On a dusty morning in the summer of 1891, a woman with twin infants had appeared on Preston's horizon. And in choosing to help her, in saying those simple words about the ranch needing the sound of children, he had set in motion a love story that would define the rest of his life. It was not always easy. It was not always perfect. But it was real and it was theirs, and that made it more precious than anything else in the world. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, as children were gathered up and farewells were said, Preston and Lily remained on the porch, unwilling to let go of the magic of the evening. Around them, the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms. Cattle lowed in the distance. Horses nickered in the barn, and somewhere an owl called out, its cry echoing across the prairie. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "That I would not change a single thing," Preston replied. "Not one moment, not one decision, because it all led here, to this. To us. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they made us who we are." He kissed the top of her head. "And I love who we are together." They stood there for a while longer, wrapped in each other and in the peace of the moment. And when they finally went inside, when they climbed the stairs to the bedroom they had shared for nearly 3 decades, they did so with the secure knowledge that they had built something extraordinary, a love that had saved them both, a family that spanned generations, a home that would endure. And it had all started with a cowboy who looked at a desperate woman with twin infants and said the words that would change everything. "This ranch needs the sound of children." He had been right. It did need that sound. But what he had not known, what he could not have predicted, was that in filling his ranch with the sound of children, he would fill his heart with more love than he had ever dreamed possible. And so the story that had begun on a dusty morning in 1891 continued, generation after generation, a testament to the power of love and family, and the choices we make when we open our hearts to those in need. Preston and Lily had found each other at exactly the right moment, and together, they had built something that would last forever. A love story for the ages, set against the backdrop of the wild Oklahoma prairie. A story of second chances and new beginnings, of courage in the face of adversity, of the healing power of unconditional love. And through it all, the sound of children echoed across the ranch, just as Preston had always dreamed it would. The sound of life and love and family, continuing on into the future, carrying forward the legacy that Preston and Lily had built together. It was, in every way that mattered, a happily ever after. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. And absolutely, completely theirs.